Chip, thanks for joining us on New Mexico in Focus.
Thank you, Megan. It's great to be here.
You had your own struggles with midlife, and now you talk about a midlife chrysalis rather than a crisis. What do you mean by that?
Well, if I give lots of speeches, and the first thing I ask is, what's the number one word associated with midlife? And 99.9% of the time, the audience says crisis. And that, the whole midlife crisis premise came from a Canadian psychologist in the mid 1960s who just studied a few men. So it's not to say that I
Sorry.
it's not to say that there's not a low point for on average for people around 45 to 52. The data on the U curve of happiness is pretty clear. But people get happier after that point. So the chrysalis idea is that there's a caterpillar and a butterfly, and in between there's the chrysalis, and that's where the transformation happens. And so, long story short is I did have a really rough time between 45 and 50. Didn't know anything about the U curve of happiness. Didn't know anything about a midlife chrysalis. I just know that I wasn't happy with my life in all kinds of ways. And, I got to the other side of it and then spent most of my 50s as the in-house mentor to the three founders of Airbnb. They called me the modern elder. Didn't like that a whole lot at first, but they said, Chip, a modern elder is someone who's as curious as they are wise. And it's like, okay, I like that. And that led me ultimately to creating the Modern Elder Academy, MEA.
Why do you think we need to reframe the way we look at the so-called third act in our lives and how we think about aging?
Well, the truth is, with the longevity revolution that's going on now, let's be clear, it is very socioeconomically based. You can have people, the average Native American has a life expectancy of just 64 years old, which is less than Afghanistan. And yet the average Asian American United States has an average life expectancy of 87. So a 23-year age difference between those. So, but excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
what's true nationally and internationally is longevity is here to stay. And what that means is that we need to sort of reevaluate how we want to consciously curate the second half of our life. If you're 50, excuse me,
It's okay.
if you're 54 years old and you're going to live till 90, 54 is exactly halfway between 18 and 90. So 54 means that you're only halfway through your adulthood. Most people don't think that way. And instead, if you think that you're only going to live another 10 or 15 years when you're going to live a lot longer, you don't save, you don't invest, you don't put time into becoming a beginner again in something. And frankly, you maybe not don't take care of yourself from a wellness perspective. So helping people to see that the second half of their life can be just as robust of a time of curiosity and trying new things as the first half of their life is part of what we do at MEA.
What are we missing as a society by not taking full advantage of this part of our life?
Well, for one, we have a very low unemployment rate in the United States. And if all of this immigration stuff that's been going on comes to pass, we're not going to have as many immigrants coming to the United States. And therefore, people need to work longer. They need to work longer because they're living longer, but also because the economy needs them, needs us. I'm 64 and I don't plan to be retiring anytime soon. So I also think there's a lot to be learned from the intergenerational collaboration we can have between boomers, Gen X, and millennials, and now Gen Z, such that when a younger brain tends to be fast and focused in terms of how they look at things, an older brain, and it's called fluid intelligence, an older brain has crystallized intelligence and tends to think more systemically and connects the dots. So if you have a team full of both younger and older people on it, you're maybe getting the best of both worlds. And that's what I learned in my 7.5 years at Airbnb, as the oldest person in the company and twice the age of the average person in the company. So I think there's a real opportunity for us to have an intergenerational potluck where everybody brings to the table what they do best.
How do you address some of these issues with the Modern Elder Academy?
Well, we started with our campus in Baja on the beach in Mexico, and now we have the campus here in the Galisteo Basin about 25 minutes from the plaza in Santa Fe. And the program really has four key components to it. One is how do we navigate the transitions of midlife? And we go through a lot of them. How do we cultivate purpose at any age? How do we learn how to own our wisdom and even use some Native American traditions and connect with Native American elders to help teach us some things? And then finally, how do we reframe our relationship with aging? Because Becca Levy at Yale has shown that when you shift your mindset on aging from a negative to a positive, you gain 7.5 years of additional life. So, having a pro-aging perspective, meaning what gets better with age, and of course, your body doesn't, your face doesn't. We were talking, on the break before, like, okay, yeah, we don't look as good as we used to, but we might be a little wiser. We might be a little more curious. We might be better at emotional intelligence and spiritual curiosity, and we may value our relationships more. We may be better at editing. There's all kinds of things. I wrote a book called Learning to Love Midlife, 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age, because I wanted to go out and talk to academics to find out what gets better with age, because we know what doesn't get better with age.
You alluded to using some drawing on Native American wisdom. Do you have Native American teachers at the
We
academy?
do. We do. And also in our online programs. So we've worked with Native American teachers, and it's an important part of being in New Mexico. If you're in New Mexico and you're calling yourself an elder academy, the modern elder academy, and you're not tapping into the abundant wisdom of the local community and specifically the native people and some of the native traditions. It's just so interesting. Being on the land here, our campus in Galveston Basin is almost 2,600 acres. So land wisdom, understanding the land, understanding the weather. These are the kinds of things that, amongst many things, that I've learned from some of our native elders.
Why did you choose Santa Fe?
When I was a kid, my uncle worked for the Navajo Nation, and in Window Rock, Arizona, at the capital of the Navajo Nation. And so our family would get in our station wagon and drive to Window Rock every summer, and then we'd go to Santa Fe after that. And I used to say to my parents, "Oh, we're in a different country now," and partly because it's called New Mexico, but partly because New Mexico felt like a different country. And so I was always fascinated with Santa Fe and New Mexico in general. I used to come here on vacation. I loved going to White Sands. If I don't have the money or the time to go to the Sahara Desert, I'll go to the White Sands. And I loved Ojo Caliente, even way, way, way back when it was much more funky than it is today. I've been going to Los Poblanos and staying there and enjoying that place. So when we knew during COVID, we knew we wanted to have a U.S. location. I just was pretty clear that this was the location that we should be in Santa Fe. Santa Fe has been a place where people have been coming for decades, maybe even centuries, seeking things, and MEA is definitely a place where wisdom seekers come together to learn from each other.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who retire to New Mexico, particularly Santa Fe, who've had careers in foreign service and business and seem to be primed for what you're teaching at the Modern Elder Academy to keep going with those skills.
Well, and many of the faculty members we have, our facilitator staff is all local. And by the way, everything we did in constructing, all the architects, the designers, the contractors, the engineers, all local. But all of our facilitators are local. Then we bring in guest faculty. And some of the guest faculty is local. Joan Boroshenko is a local and well-known as an author and neuroscientist. And then we also bring in, guest faculty, everybody from Elizabeth Gilbert, Eat, Pray, Love, to Krista Tippett from On Being, Arthur Brooks, the Harvard professor, Richard Rohr, who is a local, Albuquerque, and Michael Franti, the award-winning musician, all come in and help lead workshop with us.
You have alluded to this, Chip, but we now have 5 generations in the workplace. What are the ramifications of that?
Well, we better learn our various different communication styles. I love email, but that's partly because I'm a boomer. I'm a young boomer, but I got to tell you, when I'm going to a Gen Z person, they're like, okay, I'll text you, or I'll direct message you or whatever. It's like, okay, okay. So we have to learn that the communication styles are different. Also need to understand, I think one of the most important things for older people in the workplace is to never start a sentence with, well, let me tell you how the world works. Otherwise, you get an okay boomer hand in your face. And so having that curiosity across the generations and having it not just be older people being curious about younger people, but vice versa, is really an essential part of what it means to have an effective intergenerational workplace.
Well, there can be a lot of ageism in the workplace, and also resentment by younger workers who feel they're falling behind economically. They may see someone who's not retiring as a barrier to their success. How would you reframe that?
Well, I think, here's an interesting stat that the U.S. Department of Labor says that by the year 2027, the majority of Americans will have a younger boss. So it isn't, I'd say 25 years ago, it was true. If you had an older boss and they were not leaving their job, it was an impediment for your career growth. Not so much anymore. In fact, if within 2 years, the majority of us will have a younger boss. And I did when I was at Airbnb. I had a boss who I was mentoring, who was 21 years younger than me, the CEO of the company, Brian Chesky. So it doesn't necessarily mean, if we have workers in the workplace longer, that they're necessarily going to be managing younger people. In many cases, they're going to have to learn how to report to someone younger than them. And that's another reason why, what an opportunity we have by creating some mutual mentorship. When I was at Airbnb, I could teach the younger people I was working with a lot about EQ, emotional intelligence, but they could teach me a lot about DQ. I don't mean Dairy Queen. I mean digital intelligence. And we were both better off for that. So, having a recognition that younger people have a lot to offer. And in some companies, if the company is very focused on the digital world, it is often the case that younger people take the jobs of older people. Older people then stay in the workplace reporting to a younger person.
New Mexico's over 65 population is growing faster than the rest of the nation. Policymakers are looking at this as a potential crisis. Is that an accurate characterization?
I don't think it's a crisis at all. I think the premise behind the crisis is that people over 65 are by nature taking resources as opposed to giving them. But, the truth is that a lot of the wealth of the country is with people 65 and older, and therefore a lot of the taxes that are paid by people 65 and older. But also, I think that for a lot of the people who are 65 and older in Santa Fe and in Albuquerque and throughout the state, they are very much still in it. They may want to live here and have a portfolio life where they have multiple, 2 or 3 different part-time pieces of work they're doing. So yes, older people do need more health resources. That is absolutely true, especially as we get to 75 and 85. But I wouldn't fret about this. I actually think it really does give the opportunity for us to create a more intergenerational workplace and offer mentoring opportunities for people who, you mentioned before the Foreign Service. There's lots of people in the Foreign Service who are retired who could teach somebody younger about, the way the world works. But from the point of view of the younger person teaching that older person something as well.
You anticipated my next question. Are there potential opportunities? You've touched on some of them.
Yeah. We have almost 200 alumni in the MEA community in New Mexico who are New Mexico residents. And so what we try to do with our MEA alums, we have about 7,000 graduates globally from 60 countries, and we have 58 regional chapters. One of them is in New Mexico. So what we try to do is help our graduates to build relationships across the generations, to learn from and teach people at Santa Fe Prep or at St. John's College or at University of New Mexico. I mean, so the idea of helping to create the channel across the generations is important because we sort of live in an era of age apartheid. And what I mean by that is, the generations are quite separate in terms of how they interact and connect. So learning how to create bridges across the generations is pretty important.
Of course, many people in their third act of life may want to retire, but economically they just can't, which can be pretty depressing for some folks. What would you say to them?
I would say, whether it's by choice or necessity, you probably will live, you probably will both live and work longer than your parents. So you better find something that you love doing. So for some people, part of the reason they are excited about retiring is they're doing backbreaking labor and they just can't do it anymore. And therefore, okay, what are they going to do? Well, maybe they will help train, and whether it's in the trades or whether it's as a massage therapist or physical therapist. So you don't want to be doing that work physically anymore, but you can actually train someone else. So how do we create more training and apprenticeship programs to do that? And that's something we're working on right now. So I think, looking at that, there's a great book by Arthur Brooks, who's teaching this summer at MEA in Santa Fe, called From Strength to Strength. And what he shows is that as we get older, the kind of professions that open up to us are being teachers and being mentors and being coaches and being therapists, because, I don't want a 25-year-old therapist. I would like a 65 or 75-year-old therapist. So there are certain qualities that we really prize, and usually wisdom is one of them. And it's often found in people who are older who can be in a teacher kind of role.
Well, Chip Conley, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you, Megan. It's really great to be here.